Thank you. It's really good to be here. I flew in from the U.S. thinking that summer would have come to Canada. And imagine my shock when I walked into the airport. I was like, this place never gets summer. Um, Early on, when I came to the U.S., I learned the one thing you never do in the winter is to put your tongue on a pool. Lots of stories about winter. I know many people are wondering what's this guy doing here and how did he come to be picked as a speaker. I'm not an Aboriginal young person. But I strongly believe that the problems of indigenous peoples here and the problems of indigenous people in Africa and around the world are so similar and connected, where for so long we've been marginalized and for so long we've gone through extreme circumstances. I've watched in my country and other parts of Africa as people have been killed, millions of people. Women have been raped as tools of war. I've seen as children have been given guns, put on drugs, entire communities destroyed. I've watched people die. I've watched babies die. Watching children dying from starvation. Children dying because their parents can't feed them. Watching people being sick from malaria and cholera and other preventable diseases right now, and staying and dying from diseases that we have cures for. I've been there and I've seen all these things firsthand and I've experienced it, but I still have so much hope. I have hope for a world where no longer will children die. I have hope for a world where no longer will families be destroyed. I have hope for a world where no longer will people be on the streets, homeless, where entire communities are being destroyed by policies put in place to separate, to break cultures, to change people. It's happened not only here, it's not happening here, but it's happening across Africa, across Asia, where indigenous people are having their resources exploited from them. I have that hope, and I truly believe that each person in this room can be a part of change. Each person in this room can be a part of changing the world. Of all the things that we've seen, so much hurt, so much pain, so much suffering happening around the world. We see in Africa and across the world the fact that right now, every single day, 32,000 children will die from hunger and disease. I remember in my country, Liberia, before the Liberian Civil War started, we never thought there would come a day in our country where mothers and fathers would watch as their children were dying from hunger. When I grew up in Liberia, we never ever thought there would come a time when we'd be experiencing this. We never ever thought there would come a time when Liberia would be forced down to a condition so poor that people would watch their children die from starvation. I remember as I grew up in the 80s, we'd watch on our TV screens and see the Ethiopian famine happening. And I used to watch and see the images of children who were suffering and dying. And for me, it never made sense. I used to say to my mom, how is it possible that there's someone somewhere in the world who is dying from hunger. And of course, my mom used to say to me, well, there's more reason for you to eat all your food. But we never thought that would happen. And then in 1989, a guy named Charles Taylor announced this revolution, and Charles Taylor said he was going to change Liberia in 3 days, and there will be no bloodshed and no human suffering whatsoever. And there will be a grand revolution. And I remember when he announced this war, people went out in the streets dancing and celebrating. I mean, I was 9 years old. I didn't understand politics, but hey, I didn't have to go to school that day, so I went out dancing and singing myself. And then the war started. And Liberians started to watch on their TV screens, and we weren't seeing people in other parts of the world suffering. We started to watch on our TV screens as the rebels advanced, and we begin to see Liberian houses being burned, and Liberian women being raped, and Liberians being killed on the wayside. And with every passing day, my mom and I were in our house having this fear that at any point that war would come to us. When the rebels did take over, I remember it started with this explosion and then having gunfire everywhere. I remember as everything started to disappear, they shut down the water supply. They shut down the electric supply. Schools and hospitals shut down. Everything that made life normal went away. And when the rebels hit our community, they came and they started to knock from door to door, forcing people out of their homes. And I remember they came to our house and they knocked on our door, and it was my mom and I, and they said we had to get out. And we weren't allowed to take anything because their commanders had told them, go into the city and whatever you see, take it as yours. We left our homes and we got on this highway, the national highway. And I remember as far as the eye could see, there were people walking and people trying to find a new place to call home. I was a lazy bum when I was growing up. I had never walked a day in my life. So I'm there freaking out and crying all over the place. And my mom's like, yeah, you got to walk. We're all walking. And we started walking, and right there before my eyes, I had grown up where my mother never let me watch anything unless it was rated PG or rated G. And then right there before our eyes, we started to stop at military checkpoints and see as the rebels were killing people, and as the rebels were raping people, and as the rebels were calling people off the lines, and for whatever random reason was torturing people. For the first time, I saw someone who was my age, who was 10 or 12, carrying a gun, a real gun, not the rubber guns that we were used to seeing, but carrying a real gun and actually killing people. And in our community, children and young people were taught to respect. When older people and elder were talking, you didn't talk back. So imagine the shock of seeing young people who were armed and who were beating their elders and who were killing their elders. It was a country that had been transformed and changed. We came eventually to this university campus. And when we got there, almost the entire population of the capital were already there. People were living out in the sidewalks. There were so many people that they were out on the roads, that they were everywhere. We walked around that camp for several minutes until someone in one of the rooms called to my mom and I, and they said, come in if there's only the two of you. And we walked into this room, a small room that now had over 16 families crammed together. We got a small space between two of those families. My mom spread a cloth on the floor, and that was supposed to become our home for the next 6 months. That first night, our families gathered and they said, don't worry, we live in a caring world. We live in a community of people where there'll be food aid for Liberia. People will bring us food. People will come to rescue us. The United Nations will help us. Governments around the world will come to our rescue.